to Real Life Counseling, a podcast by the Counseling Corner. I'm David, and I'm here each week with Dr. Ernie, founder of the Counseling Corner and licensed clinical social worker and mental health professional. And together, we are trying to explore practical, real world questions about mental health, relationships, parenting, and healing. Whether you're curious about therapy, working through something tough, or trying to support someone you love, this space is for you. And today we're talking about a topic that is near and dear to my heart: adult ADHD. Now, for those that don't know, ADHD is a neurodevelopmental condition that affects a person's ability to regulate attention, emotions, impulses, motivation, and executive functioning. And I just have to make a confession at the beginning of this so that I don't bury the lead. I am a proud member of this club. I have adult ADHD, so I'm really excited about getting to this conversation and hearing it from your perspective, Dr. Ernie. But at its core, ADHD is not a character flaw or a lack of intelligence, laziness, or a lack of motivation. I would hope that that would all be true of people that experience me, but I'm sure that is true of the broader audience. It is a difference in how the brain regulates attention, behavior, emotions, and executive function. Adult ADHD affects roughly 1 in 16. That's insane to me because I'm the one of the 16. But 1 in 16 adults in the United States, more than 15 million people. Yet many of those individuals don't realize they have it, often attributing their struggles to personality flaws rather than really, and I struggled with this too, than a treatable neurodevelopmental condition. So, Dr. Ernie, that was a really long winded introduction, but I want to thank you for joining. How are you?
I'm doing great. Great to be here, David. Great to have you. Excited to talk about this interesting and exciting subject.
Yeah, absolutely. When most people hear about ADHD, they picture a hyperactive child bouncing around a classroom. How different is the reality of adult ADHD from that stereotype?
Yeah, so it's usually pretty different, right? But let me first say, ADHD, having ADHD is like being a high performance sports car with low performance brakes. So
Jeez.
imagine a Lamborghini or a Ferrari with like bicycle type brakes or something like that.
I
There's
mean,
going to
I
be
really
lots of
get to
fast.
use the brake metaphor. Great.
Right. Lots of fast, but lots of crash. True?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's also got a little steering stuff in there as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But most adults, by the time you get to be an adult, most adults have developed ways to take that car and bank it certain ways, let off the accelerator in certain ways. They've learned ways to cope that reduce the impact of the ADHD in their life. They may have also, where before they had to sit in English class or math class for and deliver sustain a mental focus for a long period of time, right? Sustained. Now they're not probably an accountant. They might be in sales, or they're in, they do public speaking, or they do relational stuff, all sorts of stuff that you could do that don't require the same level of sustained mental focus. So you could change your life and you could develop skills. In addition, a lot of adults with ADHD that are just discovering it as an adult, many of them have what we call the inattentive type. We
Hmm.
see that even a little bit more common with females, but we see it with adults, males and females, who are just discovering that they have it. They have the inattentive type. They don't have the hyperactive type. Think of inattentive type as your brakes aren't working just with your thoughts, but
Hmm.
your body braking system works pretty well. Then you've got the hyperactive type, which the brake isn't working with the body. And then you've got combined type, it's not working either way. So
Give
a
me
lot of adults, go ahead.
give me an example of the inattentive type. This is the first time I'm hearing this.
Yeah, inattentive type would just be someone who think of your thoughts. You're regulating your thoughts. They're like super fast, but you can't slow it down. So there's really no hyperactivity. The body isn't doing all this sort of stuff. It's just the thoughts that are
Hmm.
doing.
And you're saying that there's a distinction because there's some of us, like this happens to me all the time, where literally it's happening right now because I'm paying attention to it. But like underneath my desk, I'm like shaking my leg, but it's not. It's something physical that's happening to me that I'm not always conscious of. That it's brought to my attention by like my wife if I'm doing something weird or whatever. Is that what you're referring to on the physical side? Like your body's also moving as your mind is moving, and it may be conscious or unconscious, but something has happened physically.
Yeah, in the hyperactive type, you're gonna have all this extra energy and it's gotta go somewhere. That's what they make
Yeah.
fidget spinners for and things like that to help people put that energy somewhere so they can calm down and they can focus. With the combined type, you've got that and the thinking process. A lot of people have combined type, but some people just have the inattentive type where it's really not impacting their energy, their body energy at hardly at all. It's just impacting their ability to slow down, pay attention, sustain mental focus, right? And we see that, you know, where you might see two ADHD kids in a classroom. Let's use stereotypes, but a stereotypical boy climbing all over everything and just acting insane. And then you got a girl who can't focus to save her life, but she's not climbing on anything. She's just sitting, being, you know, all pretty mellow, right? Pretty reasonable for a kid, but her thoughts are all over the place.
And again, as we're talking about this, I guess I want to double back and re-emphasize this as an asterisk to this conversation is that as Dr. Ernie is bringing forward examples, that we're talking about examples, whether it be my own life or others, that these are just examples. This shows up in so many different ways in people's lives, and it requires a much deeper conversation than just these sound bites that we're doing. But in order for us to communicate about this, we have to use some examples to kind of bring some pictures forward around what we're describing. And so please, if it doesn't fit, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not about you. It just we're just using an example.
Yeah.
But
David, one other quick thing with the ADHD, just technically, it all falls under ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity. And then you've got inattentive type, hyperactive type, and combined type. So technically, it's all called ADHD. What we frequently call that inattentive type, though, the layman's term would just be ADD. We call
yes,
it ADD, right? So you might have heard that.
yeah, I get
Uh,
the high definition kind.
yeah.
Uh, so I get the HD part of it. With that being said, how because this has been an area of opportunity in my own life. I've struggled a lot with identity issues and struggled with who I am as a person, imposter syndrome, and all of these other things. How often do you see adults who have spent years believing that they're lazy, unmotivated, or simply not disciplined enough as a result of ADHD?
Yeah, so, that's super common, right? For somebody who has had ADHD their whole life, they oftentimes they know they have this sense that their intelligence, because most people with ADHD are actually fairly intelligent. It doesn't mean all are, but most are fairly intelligent. So they know their intelligence is here,
Yeah.
and then they know that they keep coming in here. And the difference between here and here is that sustained mental focus. It's that focus type issue. It's the attention type issue. And so when you keep coming in here, you start to feel like there's something wrong with me. I'm underperforming. And then also other people say, why can't you just do this? I had a friend whose dad, a different subject, but he was colorblind and his dad sat him down to because he didn't believe he was colorblind and just was yelling at him because he couldn't identify the crayons, the colors of the crayons, right? That he thought for sure he can identify them. He's got to be able to identify them, but he couldn't. He just couldn't see it. And so the difference between this and this is real. And once you understand that, then you say, oh, that makes sense. And then you can do things to help get this back up, but you have to kind of know it exists and know what to do and then do that stuff.
Hmm. I think you're kind of touching on this thought, but maybe we can expand a little bit more. Is what are some of the most common signs that someone may have ADHD but has never been diagnosed? Because you know, there's a generation of people that just think that this is the way that they are, but there might be something there that's deeper that they need to explore. What are some of the common signs?
So if you think about anything that the person is struggling with sustained mental focus, so you're going to see that in chronic procrastination, poor time management, emotional regulation, forgetfulness, losing things, difficulty staying organized, starting projects and not finishing them, all sorts of things like that, and they can feel overwhelmed by tasks. Now, it's important also to say that people with ADHD, they can focus, and sometimes they can hyper focus. They can be super focused, and then nothing else exists during that time. So that's also an element of it. So if you also find yourself that you're just too focused on things, and you also have these other problems, there's a chance that it could be ADHD. It's just like when you look at anything else, though, and you try to Google something and diagnose it. Could be this, right? Sometimes it could be the
Yeah.
exact opposite type thing.
Yeah, I think that was one of the hard things because I didn't get diagnosed too much later in my life, and it really helped me understand some things when I think that one of the challenges that people face is that they don't consider the emotional weight that ADHD can kind of carry. What is like years of missed deadlines, forgotten commitments, and feeling different due to someone's self-esteem. I can speak personally to it, but based off of your practice, what does that do based off of your experience and the people that you've had an opportunity to serve and help?
Yeah, so I'm going to use an example, and this one happens to deal with medication, but just because the medication made a distinct difference in this person's life. But not certainly not all people with ADHD need medication or want to take medication. However, I do remember a father, and he found out he had ADHD. He got medication. He took the medication, and as soon as it started to kick in, he just started to cry.
Mm,
Wasn't crying because of the medication, it was crying because he realized, "Oh my goodness, this is what other people have been experiencing, and I haven't been experiencing any of this. My life was so different." And so there can be this grieving, like, "Oh my goodness, I
yeah.
went through all this," and all that baggage that came along with what you thought about yourself and what other people thought about you, right? You don't care about them because you let them down. You didn't stay focused, so you must not care about your job, or you must not care about this, which usually isn't true at all. I mean, it can be true with some people, but just like anyone, uh, but with ADHD, it might be true simply because of the ADHD.
Mhm.
And that's not an excuse to have ADHD. Like, we don't say, "I have ADHD, therefore I don't have to do these things." It's important to keep in mind that the person with ADHD still has to do all these things, but when they're doing them, keep in mind it's probably twice as hard for them to be doing these things than
Mm.
another person. It's like they're running with weights on their ankles, and they're running just as fast or almost as fast, but they've got ankle weights on, right? This is harder for them.
Yeah, and I guess what I would say is that the flip side of that is that when someone I can speak for myself again, I can't speak for a whole population of people, but when I lock into something and I get into that flow state of it, my creativity is wild. Like everything is like hitting on all cylinders. It is also beautiful. And we find that a lot of people that have ADHD become very successful in different fields because of their capacity to focus on things that they're passionate about. But it's the things that are like the day to day life stuff that sometimes can get lost in the fuzziness of just how quickly the mind is working. I really appreciate you kind of unpacking that because I know that was my experience personally when I got on medication. I oftentimes will use the analogy of, my glasses is I'm not going to die if I don't have my glasses on. Just the world's a little bit fuzzy, right? But when I put my glasses on, it just really kind of clarifies some
Have
stuff.
you ever seen David, have you ever seen one of those videos where they have a young child, the first time they put on glasses, or the first time they get a
Saw one.
surgery for their ears or hearing aids, and they hear their mom's voice or see their father for the very first time, right? The child's just, it's just like a whole new world is opening up. And sometimes once you realize and you get the proper treatment, a whole new world can open up.
So when you think about that, this is a topic I think you and I have talked about a bit offline, but I first would ask you to help me name or define in a very short way if there's a difference or any difference between guilt and shame. And then address the idea that the question really, do you find that shame is often a bigger issue than the attention itself?
Yes, so I would say the attention issue, right, or the regulation of attention, that issue is difficult, but it's more of like a surface issue. Whereas shame, especially shame, guilt is I feel bad about this. Shame is like it's attacking my soul. It's like who I am,
Mhm,
right? You can have like conviction. Conviction is like I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I should change it. And then you can have guilt. I feel like I definitely did something wrong, and I feel really bad about it. And then you can have shame, which is now it's attacking me in my
mm.
in my deep down. It cuts a lot deeper. So they're both important, but one is affecting much more the personhood, and one is affecting simply the performance and how you show up and do particular tasks.
Can I make a humble request, which is what would you want someone listening today to know if they've spent years blaming themselves?
Yeah, so I would want them to know, because this is typically what they're thinking, is they're not lazy.
Mhm,
Right? They're not stupid. Sometimes people think I must just be stupid or I don't care. Those things aren't true. That this is simply, hey, you didn't come with the full braking system. The braking system needs some improvement, right? Your
mhm,
braking system, and then also with ADHD, sometimes the steering system, you can be steering that vehicle in the wrong direction. So a little tweak in there and some work on the brakes, and
mhm,
you usually can do really well. So if you built up a whole you're an adult with ADHD and you built up all the shame and feeling terrible and such, now the good news is there is good news. The good news
mm.
that this is one of our more treatable, mental health issues. This is fairly treatable, and, you can get help, and that's awesome. You can be like the kid who gets the hearing aids or the
Mm,
glasses. Alright, this is different, and, hey, I like this better. You don't have to if you don't want it, it's a quality of life issue. If
mhm,
you like the quality of life better, being able to hear better or see better, wear glasses or wear hearing aids, right? I had a friend who was blind, and when he went to see a therapist, and the therapist noticed he had bruises all on his legs because he was just starting to go blind, and the therapist said, "Hey, did you ever think about using a cane?" And he got pretty upset. "I don't need a cane," and the therapist just said, "Okay, but if you had a cane, you might not have as many bruises." So, it's his choice. And when there started to become too many bruises, then he chose, "Okay, I'm
yeah,
gonna use cane."
yeah.
Yeah.
And, it's I read a book years ago, and I can only remember one line from the book, and it was a pretty silly book, I guess, or I was silly at the time, but which is my ADHD kinda playing out in real time because I'm having a conversation with myself, but the author wrote this line, and he said, "Don't wait till things become urgent before you realize they're important," and when specifically talking about ADHD, I would just encourage whoever's listening that is struggling or something that has been said up to this point has resonated in some way that maybe you hadn't heard before. Don't wait till it becomes urgent before you realize what's important. There is ways to getting help. And we're not only talking about that a little bit here, but also through scheduling some time, maybe with the counseling corner or some additional help. But there are ways that you don't have to stay there. You don't have to get bruised, like the example that Dr. Ernie just shared. I do want to ask a question because I want to shift for time's sake into relationships at some pain point in my own life. So maybe this will end up turning into a counseling session. But how does ADHD show up in marriages and long term partnerships?
Yeah, so you can imagine that when someone struggles with sustained mental focus or emotional regulation and focus regulation type issues, procrastination, things of that sort, that's going to be pretty frustrating for the partner. And then as the partner is frustrated, that's going to be difficult for the person with this because they know their intention. They
Mhm,
know they're trying really hard. And oftentimes they may be even working harder. Their performance is lower, but they're working harder. And so that playing out in a relationship can be pretty difficult, right? If people don't understand, if people don't know, hey, this is ADHD, this is what's going on. Memory, right, or sustained mental focus isn't the same thing as caring. Caring and memory, or caring and focus, are
Mhm.
different things. And ADHD doesn't impact caring. They probably care a whole lot. However, they are going to perform differently on in certain areas depending on their ADHD and depending on how much help they're getting, or treatment they have for it.
Now, this is probably where the personal counseling is gonna come in, but I think this is gonna help a lot of people. I've heard partners say things like, "If it mattered to you, you'd remember." I've heard that. A friend, I've heard that in a friend's relationship.
Okay.
"If it mattered, you'd remember." How do you help couples understand the difference between forgetfulness and a lack of care?
Yeah, so forgetfulness may or may not be lack of care. It can be. So
Mhm,
somebody can simply have forgotten because they don't care. That
mhm,
can be. But it can also be somebody's sustained mental focus. It didn't get recorded in the same way. It's like if the camera's not rolling, it didn't get recorded. Or if
mhm,
it got recorded, but the processing of it coming back you're skipping tracks, it's jumping all over, it's gonna make it hard to perform.
mhm,
So when you're comparing for forgetfulness or lack of care is somebody doesn't actually care. They don't love you, or they don't wanna be here, or it's not a priority in their life. If they don't have ADHD and they're showing all this stuff, it can be other things too. Somebody's grieving, they've got an incredibly difficult work situation, they've got a sick child going on or something, and that could also make them forgetful, but it may have nothing to do with lack of care.
mm,
You gotta look a little deeper as to your what it looks like on the surface is lack of care.
mhm,
Couples therapy, we look at, is that actually what it is? It
mm.
may not be that at all. It could be that, but it may not be that.
Yeah, I hear that quite a bit in my own relationship, is that I'm very forgetful. So that I have to be very intentional about scheduling things on my calendar and putting things, creating systems around it, because I understand that it affects my wife. It is in some ways, for her a reflection that I don't care enough about her to remember these things. And although that is not the case, I can work on developing skills or developing tools to help me navigate that so that I can remember. And but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
David, that's an important piece that we were talking about a little bit before, is that having ADHD is not a get out of focus, a get out of remembering, a get out of, all this sort of stuff card. It's not that. It's I got to work harder at those things. But with those who love me or care about me or are around me, if they could also understand I am running with ankle weights. This is harder for me.
yeah.
But if I'm not doing anything, if I say, hey, I have ADHD, I'm not going to use a schedule. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to try any of these things that could really be helpful. Well, then you may not be caring, or you may not be responsible with your issue. We all have to be responsible with our issue, whatever that is, right? As adults, if you're in a relationship, you should be responsible with your health.
Mm,
Somebody's depending on you to be healthy. If you're not healthy, if you don't take good care of your health, you could be letting them down,
mhm,
and you might not think about it that way, but when you go for a run, you're running not just for you, you're running for your wife, you're running for your husband, you're running for your kids, you're running for your mom, you're running for those who love your friends. You're running to keep yourself, or walking, or whatever it happens to be, to keep yourself healthy. The same thing with the ADHD stuff. You're taking care of these things because that's one of our main roles, is we have to take care of our own stuff. And then hopefully we also, the old metaphor where put on your oxygen mask, right? And then help the person next to you. So it's not put on your oxygen mask and don't care about the person next to you. And it's not don't put on your oxygen mask and let everybody die. It's put on your oxygen mask so that you can breathe and then help the person next to you.
so So, due to time constraints, I think we'd have to break this episode into two segments, one related to family relationship. I think we did a really great job of contextualizing what ADHD is, the different forms in which it shows up. And that was a light touch. This is years and years of research and study that kind of go into this. And so, capturing all of this in a 30-minute episode is challenging. And so, what I want to do is kind of let's wrap up on the family stuff and then let's do another episode around how this affects work and the rest of life so that we can at least have
Okay.
a theme of family. And so before we jump out, I think that there's a lot of people listening or watching that would like to know how you view ADHD affecting parenting, because I'm sure that shows up in your practice quite a bit.
Yeah, it certainly does, and in fact, if you have a child who has ADHD, there's a really good chance one of the parents have ADHD, so and if you have a parent who has ADHD, there's a decent chance they may end up having a child who has ADHD, and if they do, then you've got maybe 2 people in the family that have ADHD. But
Yeah.
even if you just have 1 person and if one of those people is a parent, you're going to have some things that are harder because that person does struggle with particular things that we kind of lean on parents to be good at scheduling, keeping things on task, making sure the kid shows up with their, a jacket when it's
Right.
cold and the such and such, right? Whatever it happens to be, that if you struggle with ADHD, those things may be harder for you. And so sometimes you'll have someone in the family that ends up being the scheduler, someone who ends up being the double checker, right? And things like that. And then you have the ADHD person that hopefully is also stepping up and trying to do everything that they
Yeah.
can to take responsibility for their ADHD. And so it can be something that's very doable, but it's an extra struggle.
Wow. So this has been a really rich conversation. And unfortunately, we cannot pack all of these years worth of knowledge into a 30-minute episode. And so we do want to end, though, on a positive note and hopefully point you towards some resources to help, including counselingcorner.net. But Dr. Ernie, after all the years of working with people who have ADHD, what have they taught you about resilience and growth and human potential?
Yeah, so people with ADHD, especially when they're having to struggle, any sort of struggle, but ADHD, specifically, what we're talking about today is they develop a lot of grit, a lot of resiliency, right? A lot of uh, fortitude, right, and capacity. As they're developing that capacity, you gotta have the grit, you gotta have the fortitude, you gotta have the resiliency, and people with ADHD, they have to figure this stuff out because life is a little bit harder. Like I said before, they're kind of running with ankle weights to some degree, and that makes it harder. I remember this story where this is not about ADHD, but it is a story I'll tie in, that I was working with this young adult guy, and this guy had really felt bad about certain things in his life, and self-esteem was really low because he felt like he just wasn't this, and he wasn't this, and he wasn't this. So we pointed out, like, his mother he was a single mother, very low income, really didn't have any ability to cover any of the extra sort of things. He didn't get to get his teeth fixed. He didn't get to get his glasses that would, or the better, cooler glasses or that sort of stuff. He didn't have the nicer clothes. He didn't get all the private lessons in sports. He didn't get any of that. He didn't get any of the guitar lessons or the things that, like would be super cool. Eh, But as he got older and he became an adult and he got his own work and he's doing stuff, he could now get a lot of that stuff. So he could get this stuff. Just because he wasn't able to get it back then, it doesn't mean he can't have it. And once he realized, one, I felt bad and I thought it was about me, but it really was just I had some disadvantages that other people had big advantages on. If they're starting the race way ahead of me, well, you expect them to be further ahead, right? Unless you're just amazing, right? People are going to be further ahead if they start way ahead. And so when you have ADHD, you are sort of running with ankle weights or starting, behind, right? And so you're running, which makes me think of this story where one time I was out running and I'm running, thinking I'm running pretty fast. And this little bitty person just kind of ran by. This little lady came running by me, older lady, pretty old. And she just ran right by me, smoked me. And I was like, oh, wow. And so I was the super slow one, right? Now, I didn't have any real disadvantages that I knew of. I just don't run enough, right?
Mhm.
She who knows, maybe she even had disadvantages, but she was just a much better runner. So when you got 2 people who are equals in their running, that's great. Then they should, both whoever works harder and that sort of stuff. But when you got someone who has a disadvantage or an advantage, right? Then that person, if they have a disadvantage, has to work even harder. However, with people with ADHD, they do the grit, resiliency, and as they develop that capacity, where they get better and better at this stuff, then they develop fortitude where they know that they're better at it and they can be right. I have a friend who I think I mentioned earlier, a friend who was blind, who went blind. And one time he was being introduced because he's a public speaker and such. He's being introduced, and they said, "Hey, we could make everything equal if we just turned out the lights."
Mm.
And now we'd equal the playing field. My friend got up there and said, "You turn off the lights and I smoke you all. I beat you all," right? Because he is so good. He's
Yeah.
developed the abilities. People with ADHD have to develop so many abilities. When they get this ADHD thing under control, watch out. They're doing great. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of hope. People with ADHD can do wonderfully well. Take it serious, get the help that you need, be responsible, do that, and there's tons and tons of treatment and help. It is one of the more treatable issues. So do it.
Wow. That was a lot. Thank you. Thank you, little lady that smoked Ernie that gave us this example today. If you're listening, for the audience, whether you're watching us or listening to us, thank you for joining us. We know it's a real investment of your time to hang in there with us. Thank you for listening to the Real Life Counseling podcast, which is created by the Counseling Corner. If today's conversation was impactful, if it helped you, if it added a sentence or a word to help you understand what you're going through, we'd love it for you to share this episode or leave us a review. And hopefully do both. Leave us a review and share the episode. Either way. And if you want to know more information about the Counseling Corner, you can come check us out at thecounselingcorner.net. And until next time, take care of yourself and the people that you love. And thank you, Dr. Ernie, for this episode.
Appreciate it. Thank you.